In terms of determining who the audience is, it's helpful to ask if you don't already know. Um, Sometimes it's helpful if you don't have that information to, try to do a little bit of research on, who the people might be. I think that's helpful as well. I think it's also helpful to ask about what the goals are of communication, or what the end goal of the what is the outcome that we're looking for. And I think it's also when once you get into the communication, it's really helpful to try to get people united around whatever the shared mission is. I think that's kind of important as well. That to help establish that from the beginning of the communication.
Well, welcome everybody back to the Sean Trey Show. I've got a really awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, I'm Kim Nichols. Thank you so much for having me. I am a speaker. I'm a coach, consultant also. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. How did you start going down this path of being a speaker and consultant? What opened these doorways for you?
So I'm a physician, actually, by educational background, and I started doing a lot of presentations in that clinical path, and people essentially told me, "You're very good at speaking." I was surprised to hear that, to be honest, because I didn't know that about myself, and so I leaned into that and decided that I wanted to do a little bit more along those lines in terms of speaking, and decided to tell a little bit of about my story along the way. In terms of coaching, I would say I work a lot with young learners as a physician, and in an advisory and mentorship role, and that actually led to me becoming interested in becoming a coach. A lot of people had come to me for advising, kind of mentorship, and I decided I wanted additional tools to try to help people, and so I leaned into coaching.
That's awesome. Yeah, when I was looking at, when I looked at your LinkedIn, generally there's people that have one or two things that they do, but you've got this wealth of experience, and like you've had a lot of different areas that, to be a physician and a coach and a mentor. It's amazing. And it's amazing because you have so many different tools to be able to impact people's lives. Um, was there someone that impacted you, or events that shifted you down this path, kind of an epiphany moment?
Yeah, I would say I. That's interesting. I think I've been asked this question a few times. I would say I've had a little bit of a career that's been a little less guided than I would have liked.
Mm.
And so, because of that, I have kind of leaned into being what I wish that I maybe had. And so,
Oh,
yeah, that's part of what has led me down some of these different paths. I mean, also, I have a lot of different interests. That's kind
yeah.
of how I ended up in some of these different, you know, in these different areas. I guess I'll say that I like teaching. That's how I ended up kind of in an educational role. I really love mentorship again because I love people who are less experienced than me, and also because I wish that I had had a little bit more of that when I was coming along. And so I would say that that's kind of what fuels my interest and passion in a lot of these areas.
I love that. And I want to tap on that because I remember I'm an ex-ennial, and when I was younger, my friends and I would always joke that, we didn't have our, Yoda. There was no, we didn't get our Hogwarts letter. We're like, like where is that for us? Like we wanted these mentors. We felt like there was something bigger or better. But yeah, it wasn't always there. I remember in university, I was a fish out of water. I did not fit in until I met one teacher, Andrew Wheat. And Dr. Wheat was a person who just completely sent me in a different direction in my life, and it was so needed. And yet I wish there was more, and so many people are seeking that. So to become the person that you wish you had just speaks to me so much. I wish there were more people doing that.
Yeah, I will say that. And not to say that it was in a vacuum. One of the things I would say is that it's really helpful for people who are in a position to do so to call out strengths that you have to kind of help you see. Sometimes people are not able to see the strengths that, essentially that they have, right? And kind of help steer you towards certain directions. So I will say when I was a junior faculty member, there was a person who essentially told me, you have really good leadership skills. And that, even though I had been in some leadership positions, that was the first time that someone had really told me that. And that kind of encouraged me along a little bit more of a leadership pathway, or encouraged me to seek out more leadership roles. But it's important for people who are in positions to do so, to call out strengths that you see in others. People may not be able to see that in themselves, and you may be able to kind of influence someone's career trajectory based on that.
I love that. I think that it is so true that we aren't able to see some of the strengths that we have, and so often, like, if you can have someone. I remember once I worked as a teacher for many years, and one of the reasons that I got into podcasting is because I taught children and adolescents, and I loved teaching, but one of the challenges I had is that I would have those kids for a year and then they were gone.
Mm.
And I always thought about, well, how can I teach more people? How can I be able to have a platform to be able to, affect more lives? And that's why when podcasting came along, I was like, this is awesome, because I just wanted to be able. And I'm not going to lie too, one of the things that I got into podcasting was actually quite selfish, because I thought about my daughter, and I thought about all the conversations that I wish I had have had with my parents in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Now they're older, they're busy, they're got the grandkids and such. And it's hard to find time for those conversations. And I was like, I want to be able to make these conversations that someday my daughter can look back and go, oh, that's who dad was. That's what he taught. So I think that, being able to put out there and to lead in whatever way you can is powerful. But again, when I was teaching young people, my students, sometimes they weren't aware, very often they weren't aware what they were good at.
Mm.
I remember when I'd sit there and compliment everyone, I had to have this thing where I'd go around the classroom and compliment every single kid in the room. And
Uh-huh.
I would go and tell each one of them something they were good at. And once I had this one student and I said, Ryan, you are very good at speaking. And he's like, I'm good at speaking? And this kid nonstop talking. He would never
Yeah.
stop talking. I was like, yeah, very good. He's like, but he didn't know. And it was
Yeah.
wild that he didn't know.
Yeah, it's amazing sometimes the things that people don't know about themselves, to be quite honest, or maybe haven't heard about themselves. So any chance that people can get to, elevate those things, I think is really helpful. I mean, you can seriously, change the trajectory of people's, careers and their lives, to be quite honest, just by amplifying that for them.
How do you, when you go about meeting people, find things, pay attention, or be open enough to observe and to see what that person might be good at?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent question. I mean, really, I think it starts with just being observant in the first
Mm.
place, listening, having good listening skills, and also paying attention to body language. So, a lot of communication. In fact, most communication is not just the verbal part, but it's actually a lot of the nonverbal things as well. But listening, being curious about the other person, and kind of asking, clarifying questions as necessary. So, but yeah.
I love that. Right. It is. It's super being open. And like, one of the things too is I think that so often today I've went and bought a new camera for my work, and I went to buy it from a place. I actually bought the camera from one place, but I needed to get the case for the camera at another place. And this was a gentleman that I had worked with and bought gear from before, about 10 years ago. And, he was so excited. And so we would talk every time I went in there. And this is before a lot of short form video content started becoming. 10 years ago. That wasn't as big of a thing. And today I went by his office. He didn't look up from his phone the entire time.
Wow.
He looked at me, acknowledged that I was there, and then went back into the dive. And I just saw him scrolling. And then later on, he texted me, "Oh man, I wish I had talked to you more when you were here." And I was like, "I was there for 15 minutes and you didn't look up from your phone." And I'm not judging because we all do that. Like it's a very people get sucked into these devices now. But one of the things too is, at least for myself, and I try to frame everything through my relationship with my 9-year-old daughter. Tonight, she came up to me to sit, and she was sitting, and I was on my phone. She sat down beside me, and I just consciously put it away, and I put my phone away, and I said, "How are you doing right now?" And
Mm.
she was just like, she looked at me, and she's like, "Well, now that you want to ask, I'm going to tell you about all the drama in fourth grade today." And there was a lot of drama in her fourth grade class, but
Well,
I was like, I just need to be here and listen because there's going to be a day where she might not want to talk to me about this stuff. So,
yeah, that's critical. I think taking time to honor those moments and opportunities that you have for connection and really taking the time to connect, I think is really critical.
I I was having someone recently asked me about content and podcasting, and they say, "What do you see a lot of podcasters make? What's the mistake a lot of people make when they start creating a podcast?" And one of the things that I was thinking about was that they don't listen. And I don't be like, "Well, you're talking on a podcast, and how do you listen?" And I was just like, well, sometimes people will just start talking because they want to talk. But at the end of the day, are you listening to the situation, to the problems, to the challenges around you? And, are you addressing those? Because I still think it's about being present. Are you being present with your guest? Are you listening to what they share? I don't know. To me, though, I feel like there's still an art to a communication, even if you are on a stage, even if you are on a stage in front of 1,000 people. My wife is amazing at this. Not the public speaking part, but engaging an audience. She is a singer. She's a famous singer here in
Mhm.
Vietnam. She was
Uh-huh.
the first winner of Vietnam Idol,
Oh, wow.
and is pretty. Yeah, she's like.
I love that.
And here's a cool thing. I want to do. I just love this. When they brought The Lion King to Vietnam, and Beyonce's vocals, they needed someone to record for Beyonce. My wife did all of the same vocals that Beyonce did for The
That's
Lion King.
amazing. I
It's
love
cool,
that.
right?
Yeah.
But one of her talents is that she is really good at singing live.
Mhm.
First of all, she sings really well, but it's not all about the singing.
Mhm.
It's about knowing how to interact and engage and communicate with the audience.
Mhm.
She'll walk out, she'll go down those stairs, she'll go out into the crowd, like letting people sing a line. She follows, and when she finds people that are vibing and into it, she engages them more. And I
Mm.
asked her once, I was like, "How do you do that?" And she says, "I watch and I
Mhm.
listen." And I was like, "Watch and listen, that's it?" And she's like, "I watch and I listen." And I
Mhm.
was like, "It just seems so simple." I was like, "There's got to be more." And she's like, "That's it. I watch and I
Mhm.
listen." And she's like, such wisdom there.
Yeah, that's deep. Yeah, I completely hear exactly what she's saying. I think similar things when you're in communication with people in meetings or in speaking engagements as well. Yeah, I love that though.
But and yet it's like still it's one of the things that freaks a lot of people out. When
Hmm.
someone comes in and they have a challenge, it can get really stressful to simply communicate with someone,
Yeah.
whether it be in a meeting or public speaking. Um, how do you what would you tell people that have challenges with opening the doorways to communication? What are some things that they might be able to do?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is to remember why you're having the communication in the first place. Also, what are your goals for the
Mm,
communication? I think that's really important. I think it's also important to remember who is your audience.
mm.
Yeah, I think those are some of the first critical things to think about.
I had the fun of living in Asia and teaching English for a long time. And one of the things that's interesting about teaching English is people just will do it for fun. You're getting young
Mhm.
kids, and why are they learning? What's fun, right? But there's a whole different story when you teach business English. And I
Mm,
always talk to my students about that when you start teaching business English, there's a whole different ball game. And they ask, well, why is that? And I said, because every single conversation, you have a goal. There is something that you are trying to accomplish. If you walk into an office and you say good morning, well, there's there's a reason for that, whether it be supporting team morale, whether it be maybe you're getting ready to say, hey, boss, can I have a day off? Whether
Mhm.
it be, or simply just connecting with the people around you to create a strength in the group. I don't know, but there's always a goal. There's always a purpose to that communication. And I think that people will often forget that you have a goal, and I think that you can go in circles if you're not careful.
Yes. What is the end goal is very, very important to consider. And again, like, who is the audience? Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Eh, are there any things that you think can help someone figure out their goal or to determine the audience a little bit better?
In terms of determining who the audience is, it's helpful to ask if you don't already know. Um, Sometimes it's helpful if you don't have that information to, try to do a little bit of research on,
Yeah.
who the people might be. I think that's helpful as well. I think it's also helpful to ask about what the goals are of communication, or what the end goal of the what is the outcome that we're looking for. And I think it's also, once you get into the communication, it's really helpful to try to get people united around whatever the shared mission is. I think that's kind of important as well. That to help establish that from the beginning of the communication.
Yeah. And it's powerful too, because if you can get people on board with the common goal and shared purpose, it makes it easier to have difficult conversations because
Yes.
people can be there and that you understand, well, we're all working toward the same goal. So even if we have something that might not be easy that we have to talk through, we can get there.
Yeah, I think that's true, especially when people have divergent thoughts around it.
Mm.
It's helpful to bring people back to the shared understanding or the shared mission. That's critical.
And especially true in a time where communication at a larger scale in our world is very divided. I feel like I have another podcast called My Barrels and I got 4 podcasts. I'm a bit nuts like that, but
Busy. I love it.
I love it, right? I sit there and I just talk about what I love to talk about. And sometimes they
Right.
don't cross over, but one of my favorite podcasts is my Barrels and Roots podcast because I get to talk about wine all day. It is a
Okay.
wine podcast.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, but what the podcast ends up being about is less the wine and it's more about just like how we can talk again. And like one of the things that people talk about is like they love a glass of wine not because of the alcohol, but just because they just like I want to be able to sit down and have a beautiful experience with someone.
Mm,
Something that we can share, and a
yes.
shared moment is so
Uh,
powerful. And that was one of the things that every single one of the winemakers, and it's so cool. I get to talk to all these beautiful winemakers from my hometown in Napa Valley. And like, they're just all talking about like the love of they have. And like, they're like, what's your favorite memory? And they just talk about this one bottle and it was this one time.
mhm.
And what pops up for me about that is that there's always like, we're always talking about how if we could get people to sit down in all aspects of our world right now and just have conversations again and
Yes.
really see and hear each other, it
Mhm.
might fix some of the bigger problems that we're having.
1,000,000%. Very honestly, we're all more alike than we are different. And
Yes.
it starts with a conversation, just sitting down and kind of meeting people where they are and recognizing our shared humanity, because it is a shared humanity. There's lots of connection points between each of us. And, it's just kind of taking the time to find those.
I was sitting down in traffic the other day. Actually, there was a better story. One day I was flying, the first trip I flew from Vietnam to, from the US to Vietnam. And I was coming in 2001. I was a young post grad and I was on this flight and I got seated next to this 80, 90-year-old Vietnamese man. And it was major culture shock in the most beautiful way. Gentleman fell asleep on my shoulder and sat there and petted my arm for about 30 minutes, just looking at my arm here. And it was just the most innocent thing. And his family was like, "We're so sorry. He's old. He's going back to visit his brothers
Right.
one last time."
Yeah.
And I was just like, not even taken aback by it. I was just like, no, it's like literally one of the most beautiful things. It's just this person who's just seeing me. And it's just
Mhm.
like, I might have been the first person that was different from him that he ever got to sit near and
Mm,
just to
mhm.
be able to be close to. And I think that, like you said, when moving overseas, I was able to see, even though we have different languages, we share a common theme of hope. Hope. Everyone wants to have a better future. Everyone has love for family and they care. But yet, finding ways to communicate can be challenging. And if we can find that shared common humanity, it makes communication that much more simple.
I totally agree.
I mean, not,
Yeah,
not simple, but easier.
makes it easier. Yeah, for certain.
Right? But
Yeah.
sometimes conversations can go the wrong way.
Mhm.
If someone finds a conversation going the wrong way, or they might have um, taken a step in the wrong direction, do you ever have any tools that you think people can do to kind of steer things back?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on how left the conversation has gone, but
Right?
also, yeah, there are ways to definitely bring it back, though. I mean, I would say that it's important to acknowledge that the conversation may have gone differently than was intended,
Yeah.
and to just say this, you know, this conversation has gone differently than maybe either one of us has intended for it to go. But I still want to maintain relationship with you. What are the ways that we can move forward, given that this has transpired? Yeah. So
Yeah.
just leave it kind of open ended. Yeah. And just acknowledge that this happened and also that you would like to kind of move forward in light of that.
Yeah. That's powerful. There's whenever you're interacting with someone, um, in any type of communication, like one of the things that I try to remember, I had a really strange interaction with someone the other day. And one of the things that I just tried to remind myself is that there are layers. When we see a person, when we're looking at someone, it's the tip of the iceberg. You do not
Mm,
know what are the things that they might have been dealing with underneath the
mm,
surface layer. Maybe they're dealing with challenges at home. Maybe they're burned out. I
mm.
think that there's a lot of people that are
Yes.
dealing with burnout and that are dealing with having a hard time sustaining their momentum, their energy.
Mhm,
And I think that one of the things too, um, that I have had a lot of luck with my team building is trying to help people feel safe
mhm,
and making sure that, like, when I'm around. There was a great book that I was reading, and they talked about how one of the most important things for building teams and building strong communication is a feeling of safety.
mhm,
And I run my own video media company, and we are doing content marketing, and we're building. And every day I look into the future and I see the AI doing more and more and more of some of the work that we do. And I have to sit there and smile and tell my team everything's all right.
mhm.
But even if it's not all right, I still have to make people feel safe and go, you know what, whatever comes, we can adapt. We can do
Yeah.
this. But yet, if I want the best work from my team, it's this feeling of safety that I have to try to create for them. And that takes, I don't know. It's something that I have to work at constantly.
Mhm. Yeah.
What do you think people can do to create safer spaces for workers and for teams?
Mhm. So one of the things I like to think about is psychological safety, if that makes sense, and that's a little bit of a nuanced safety because that involves people feeling like they have the ability to speak up without being, retaliated against, or being able to take interpersonal risks, kind of with each other. So I think it's important for people to feel kind of safe in that capacities. When you do that, like people will speak up against mistakes that they see being made.
Mhm.
They also might be more likely to bring up new ideas and new thoughts,
Yes.
new possible innovations that the team might consider, because those are things that lead to growth of the team and also growth of like organizations. So that those are kind of things that I think about. And ultimately, I feel like psychological safety leads to people feeling quote more safe in general.
You reminded me of the story of I can't remember the name. Maybe you'll know it. There was a doctor that was leading the charge about cleanliness in hospitals and was
Mm,
talking. This was like 100 something years ago, maybe longer. And it was in Europe. And this doctor was telling everyone, we need to wash hands, we need to sanitize, we need to do all these things. And it was not a safe. This person was essentially pushed back, almost pushed out of the hospital because they're like, that's not the way it's done. And it was wild because there was not a psychological safety. It was just this person was attacked and bullied. And yet their beliefs were right. The
mhm.
innovations that they wanted to take were the right innovations. And yet, because there was not this psychological safety, this space to speak out, because again, this person was just attacked and ostracized. It's wild that, if you are not being able to create that space, you can stifle some of the greatest minds. You think about that, the number of people that are scared to speak up, and they could be the person that has the cure for this thing.
Yeah, no, yes, that definitely happens. And that voice can come from anyone on the team. And so it's being open to um, all voices, basically, because you never know who's gonna have the idea that you need. Yeah,
I,
who's gonna
I
have the
love
solution.
that. Sorry, I interrupted you. So there was a bit of lag. Please continue.
Yeah, no, I just was gonna say, yeah, you never know who's gonna have the solution that you're looking for.
Yesterday, my daughter and I went did Christmas shopping. And for my wife, we could not figure out what to get her. And we got to the mall. And at the mall, there was this new booth, and it was make your own perfume.
Oh,
And so
sounds-
it's awesome, right? And we
yeah,
were like, and so I was just like, oh my goodness, this is so cool. And they have some different like mixtures that you can smell. Like this is this one. These are some templates. And then they let us try out a couple samples. And we were like, well, my daughter was like, I don't know about this. This is a great smell, but I want to add this
oh,
one scent right here. And when we added that in, like it was like a 7% that we added that scent. And that one little component changed
wow.
everything. It brought out all of these hidden scents. And I was just looked at my daughter and I was like, bravo, well done. But we didn't realize the power that one thing had. And it just got me. I did a post about it on LinkedIn today. I was like, we think about individual components, and this is teams as well. We think about all these individual components on a team. And it's like I have a bunch of really fun, interesting people on my team that I've hired. And individually, they're just wacky people like me. But when we come together as a team, we create awesome things. And I'm proud
Mm,
of like what we do together.
mhm,
And I think one of the things too is like we forget the power that one single component can have if it's allowed to shine in the
mm.
mix. But you got to give it space.
You do have to give it space, and to elevate it. I think also is important. The bottom line is that every single person is bringing something to the
Yeah.
table, and it's kind of allowing that, as you mentioned, the ability to shine. And the thing is like when you also recognize that people are bringing things to the table, and like for that individual person, like you recognize for them that they alone have something to contribute, like people actually bring more of that to the table, and it actually grows that much more.
I love that. I love that. My daughter, growing up in a different culture is awesome. A mixed different culture. She has a little bit of my culture. She has the culture from Vietnam. And one of the things, though, that there is a challenge, and I'm working with her on this, is that the approach to leadership here is very different. And
Hmm.
it's something that, and I'm going to explain why. And what my daughter's insight was, and I'm actually really proud of her for coming to that. Um, in her school, they elect a class leader in second grade.
Mm.
Okay. And that class leader stays all the way till fifth grade.
Oh, wow.
And there's no changes. There's no, let's see if someone else can become the leader. It's just like, and I was sitting there going, how was this kid chosen? Like,
Mhm.
what is the criteria for choosing this? Like, well, his daddy talked to the school. And I was like, oh, okay. One of those situations. And one of the things that I was talking to my daughter the other day, they had a competition,
Mhm.
and it was a tug of war competition. And they all got together, and she was like sitting there. And in the first match, they were going up against the fifth grade, and they were fourth grade. And so the first match, the fifth graders just clobbered them. And then they went again, and they started pulling even. And they got this taste, and they're like, oh, wow. And then suddenly my daughter started yelling, pull, 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 pull. And the kids started pulling with her. And I was like, keep shouting. I'm there. I was with her. I was like, you can do it. I was like, pull. And I started cheering with her, pull, pull, pull. And they won one match. They won
Wow.
one game. They took a game against the fifth grade. And all these little fourth graders are losing their mind, like that they were able to pull a match. And then they just got absolutely destroyed when the fifth grade got their act back together in the last one. They were just much bigger. But my daughter came, and her classmates came over to me. And first of all, her and her classmates were so sorry for losing. I was like, you guys did more than you know. Beating the fifth grade for one game was really impressive. And my daughter, I said, what did you learn from that? And she said, well, there's a couple things. One, when we work together, we can accomplish more. And I was like, I'm just sitting there going, yes, that's wonderful. It's huge. And then the second thing is, she looked at me and she's like, I'm going to pull back a Harry Potter reference. I love the scene in Harry Potter where Harry was saved by a Patronus.
Mhm.
And then in the end of the movie, he realizes it was his own Patronus that saved himself. And when she looked at me and she says, I was waiting. Oh man, I'm trying to fight back tears on this. It was just really special. She was like, I was waiting for someone to lead, and no one did.
Uh-huh.
And then I said, and what happened in that moment? And she says, I realized I could lead. And I started and I just was like, oh, so excited about that, because she was in a setting where no one was encouraging that. No one was validating that anyone can step up and lead.
Mhm.
And then she found that thing inside herself. And I said, well, what do you want to do with that now? And she says, well, I hope that I can do that more. And I said, and I hope that you can tell your friends that they can also lead. Everyone can be a leader. And she looked at me, she's like, anyone can be a leader? You don't have to just be voted in. I said, if you can stand up and help people and get them to see your shared values. You guys were all working on trying to win a match. You guys were trying to do something great as a team. And she's like, yeah, and we succeeded. And I said, because you guys worked together and someone was able to shout, pull, pull, pull. It was just a powerful moment that happened last week.
This is amazing, an amazing experience for her, but also amazing insight for her to experience at such a young age. This is a concept that I call leading from where you are, which anyone can do, right? Again, you never know who's going to have the exact solution that you're looking for. That can come from anyone. And really, it just takes being open to the voices. Yeah, of everyone.
I love that. I started into a big editing project last year, and I was in over my head. I'll be the first to say it. We were doing like 1,000 videos a month, and I was just trying to find solutions, and we were able to upscale. We were able to step up. My whole team did a great job, but it was my self-proclaimed laziest worker that was finding all the solutions. She was like, I'm lazy, so I'm going to find ways to do this faster and easier. And she did. And she created the system that is now the basis for my whole team's editing workflow. And I was like, you're not being lazy, you're being smart. You're just trying to find ways to create, less friction and to make things smoother. And she's like, everyone always told me I was lazy, but really I was just looking for an easier way to do things, a more smooth way to do things. And I said, and that's powerful. But here she is, 26 years old, been told she's lazy her whole life. And she's actually this powerful leader that just no one saw that she had this potential. And, every day she's got the best attitude. She's one of my favorite workers because she comes in with just outside the box thinking all the time.
Yeah, I think you said a lot in that story. One, I think they're having some curiosity about kind of what is going on with people. That's number one. Two, they assigned, kind of motivation to the person, right? Um, and three, they basically described that the person was lazy when in actuality, she was just looking for, quote, an easier way to do things, maybe a more efficient way of doing things, right? So essentially, what needed to happen there is just to have a little bit more curiosity about kind of what was going on with the person. Yeah,
I love curiosity.
it's really
I don't
good.
think I don't think we talk about curiosity enough because I think curiosity is like a magic. I don't know, just like I had the most awesome experience when I was a kid. I got to go to space camp, and my parents it did not have the money for that. My dad and mom set aside everything they could for a couple summers. And I just was obsessed with space and NASA. And I loved the movie Space Camp. And my parents, bless their hearts, made it happen. And I'm forever thankful for them. And I remember it was one of the coolest things ever because we got into this room and it was an entire just curriculum of people going, let's be curious. And they just dumped all of these pieces of whatever from around the kitchen, like all of these things that you could find. And they said, build your space station.
Mm,
Here's some tape, here's some glue, build a space station. And then you're going to have to explain it. And it wasn't like, this is the way, it was just like, go have fun.
mm,
And the curiosity, the experience, and everyone was in there and everyone was looking at everyone else's stuff. And they were like, go look at the other teams, learn from the other teams, see what
mhm,
the other teams are doing. And it's like, no, this is mine, that's yours. No, everyone was learning from everyone. Everyone was just going around. And it was this organized chaos. But the stuff that people created was amazing, you know,
mhm.
but it started with curiosity.
Yeah, what do you think? What do you think that unlocked for you? Just allowing the space to be more open versus having it be more prescriptive.
It tapped into something inside of me I didn't know was there.
Mm,
My daughter is an old soul. And the other day, she told me a story yesterday. And she's also a bit of a rebel. I don't know where she gets that from. But she and her mom, for sure. But she told me that she has a tutor that she works with because English is her first language. We spoke it at home, but yet we put her into Vietnamese school because we wanted her to really be able to be good at both languages. And so we still have some extra help that she gets. And this tutor came in and she has her writing exams this week. And the tutor said, write it just like this. I
mm,
want you to memorize this, and this is how I want you to answer it. And my daughter looked at me and she says, I chose not to do that. And I
mm,
said, okay, well, what did you do? She says, I used my own story. I talked about my experiences because I don't care about what she told me to write. I wanted to write it my way. I said,
mhm,
what happened when you did that? And she says, my teacher at school said it's way better. And I said,
mm,
it's great. And I said, why did you want to do that? And she says, because if I can't make it my way, I don't want to make it at all. And I
mm,
said, I think that when we try to find ways to do things, it created a fire. It lit a fire inside of me, a spark of some sort. And
mhm,
when I had that spark, I got thirsty for more.
mhm.
And I just wanted new puzzles and new Legos. And I mean, I was insatiable as a kid. And I didn't become an astronaut, but I never stopped reading. I never stopped learning. And it just turned on something for me.
Yeah, I feel like this speaks to when we allow, teams to be, creative, kind of use their imagination to be innovative around things. People also bring forward their best work and also can, put forward their best products as
Mm,
well. So that's kind of what spoke to me actually from the original story. So
I
yeah,
love
I
that.
appreciate you naming that.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about one thing because when I was looking at something that you wrote on LinkedIn, and it was just in your bio, it says, um, a leader as coach mindset. Can you talk to me about that? Because that sounds so interesting. And I just was like, I wanted to know, what did you mean by that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What I mean when I say that is I am not necessarily super prescriptive unless I have to be. So, in other words, like I will ask questions. Um, I may ask, like, how can we accomplish something versus just saying, well, what we need to do is this. There are times where a leader needs to say, we need to do this or that. There are definitely those times. And then there are other times where it's reasonable to just ask, what are the ways that we can accomplish this? Or what are your thoughts about how we can accomplish this? Because that allows the team actually to think creatively. It allows people to, it allows other leaders on the team or other people on the team to kind of, exercise their own creativity. And then you allow other leaders to develop and then people actually, put forward their best work. It creates trust on the team because people feel like you trust them to come up with a solution. Also, versus just being told, kind of top down about what needs to be done all the time. And again, there are times where people need to be told kind of top down, but that's not every time.
Yeah. Can I ask you one last question
Sure, absolutely.
before we finish up? Um, if you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice, what
Hmm.
advice would you give yourself?
Ooh, how much time do we have?
Right? As much as you need.
There's a lot of things I would tell my younger self. I would say, definitely be willing to take chances. I guess I would say that. Think outside the box. Put yourself out there,
Mm,
and that means like, um, taking risks and be willing to kind of showcase yourself a little bit and showcase what you think you might do well, or just in general be willing to showcase yourself because that allows again other people to see you, and then it would allow an opportunity, for instance, for people to maybe pick up on things that you do well, even if you're not able to see those things in yourself at this point.
if people want to learn more about you and what you do, where can they go and find more information about you?
Thank you so much for that question. I can be found at levelupwithdrkimn.com, or I can be emailed at kim at levelupwithdrkimn.com. Or you can connect with me on LinkedIn at Kim Nichols.